Hey guys, it's us Marie Carlson again, and I would just like to share with you guys the first chapter of my book Armistice, which comes out October 28th, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Chapter 1. I knew exactly what was going to happen because it was the last day of school. Most of the students in my grade had been stockpiling their homework for this moment, and sat anxiously in their seats, legs jiggling and palms sweaty. For many, the stack of paper was so large that it dwarfed the teenager behind it. The last bell of my junior year rang, startling me. Then the chaos happened. They all rose from their seats and cheered, the strange ritual beginning. Papers were heaved into the air, twirling and fluttering to the floor like giant, crumpled snowflakes. I had never understood why anyone would trash the school as they left for the summer, or why the teachers would let them. To me, it was stupid and rude. As the room cleared, I stayed behind to help Mr. Ivanov clean up. Nobody liked him or his teaching. He was blunt and serious and hardly ever smiled. I didn't mind him, but I didn't make trouble. He looked just about as Russian as his name. A thick, dark mustache rested on his upper lip. I always thought it made him look like Tom Selleck. I kneeled and pulled a pile of paper close, heaving it to a nearby desk. I had participated in these shenanigans just once, and vowed never to do it again. Watching exhausted teachers clean up our pointless mess seemed too cruel, so now I stayed afterwards, hoping to get them home a bit earlier. Turning to grab another armload, I was startled by the sudden presence of my blonde-haired crush, David Whitney. Assisted me in the cleanup. I longingly watched his biceps flex under the sleeves of his gray ring-neck tee as he scooped the papers and carried them to the waste bin. I played with the oval locket my aunt had given me as a baby, imagining his strong arms around me, how it might feel if he ever kissed me. His hazel eyes locked mine, and I quickly turned to grab some more papers, but only succeeded in tangling my feet in the desk's legs and tumbling to the ground. I lifted my aching body into a sitting position and began to rise, when a hand on the small of my back sent tingles up my spine. "Are you all right?" asked David. I opened my mouth to reply, but the words were stuck in the back of my throat. I bit my lip, grasping to form a coherent sentence as I examined his chiseled face. It had never been so close to mine before. It was polished, and there wasn't a single blemish on it, only a small scar on the bridge of his nose. "Let's not mess up your beautiful face." David removed his hand from my back. "I'm fine, thanks." "That's it? That's the best you could come up with, Junie?" The heat of my cheeks was almost unbearable, and I must have been as red as a ripe tomato. I couldn't breathe, only capable of a dazed stare into those swirled green irises. He had spoken to me only once before in gym class, once when the basketball got away from me. It was easy to become distracted in daydreams that we were dating, but that would never happen, since every girl I saw him with was a cheerleader, exactly what I was not. Don't get me wrong, I could have pulled off the uniform, and most of the boys thought I had this great body, but I was clumsy. I would have most likely tripped or knocked down the pyramid if I had joined the squad. I stayed after school one day to help my art teacher make a banner for a pep rally, and ended up banned from the gym for 2 weeks because I injured the star of the basketball team by tripping him up in my art supplies. But those moments of seeing David, sweat glistening and adrenaline pumping, as he leapt into the air to make the basket were enough to make a girl, "Right?" David's voice ripped me from my thoughts. Oh, good grief, the tiny voice inside me was clearly not amused with my fascination of David's charming looks. I shook my head and cleared my mind. "What?" I asked, crouching to the floor to avoid eye contact. "You're an artist, like that Miles kid I see you with all the time, right?" Standing quickly, just as David crouched down, the top of my head collided harshly with his chin. I rubbed my head and noticed him grimacing. "Are you okay?" I asked. I bit my tongue. I nearly said, "Want me to kiss it and make it better?" "You've got about as much grace as a banana," he said. "Sorry," I mumbled, my head's pronounced pounding adding insult to injury. "It's okay. I forgive you." He placed his hand on mine for a lingering moment. The surge of heat took over my face again, this time radiating all the way down to my toes. Why was he suddenly so talkative? He practically ignored me all year. At least I thought he did. I guess you could call me an artist. I love to draw and read. Oh, I just thought someone like you wouldn't waste their time on stuff like that. What do you mean, someone like me? My forehead tensed. Well, someone as stunning as you should be busy with a boyfriend, right? Ugh. Boys were always commenting on my looks, never taking the time to look beyond them. I'd hoped David was different. The freak doesn't have a boyfriend, David, said Kelsey James, standing in the doorway at the front of the room with her hip cocked to one side and her arms crossed. Kelsey was David's cheerleader girlfriend and the ringleader of the barrel of monkeys that cheered for David and the rest of the team. I didn't have too much of a problem with the other cheerleaders by themselves, but get them together and they became a pack of wolves, ready to go in for the kill and slaughter my every hope for an enjoyable existence. Miles told me I tended to judge people too quickly, but it is so hard not to when I was constantly bombarded by people calling me names or playing some prank on me. I learned never to let my guard down at school or I'd just get hurt. Last week, my locker was filled with shaving cream, and Kelsey and her minions just stood there laughing as they chucked the empty cans at me. The week before, a container of live mealworms was poured into my backpack during lunch, and just yesterday, they'd lit my hair on fire. Thankfully, a sink was nearby, but I still smelled like burnt hair the entire day. David rose and ran to Kelsey, blowing through the pile of papers I had just collected, to forget once again that I even existed. The arms I had wished were wrapped around me were now wrapped around Kelsey instead, gently pulling her close. The feather-like kiss quickly turned into a full-fledged make-out session. The sting of his rejection mingled with the queasiness in my belly over such a saliva-filled reunion. Not that I should have ever expected him to actually be interested, but I had a small hope he was. Obviously my yearning for some type of affection from a boy I liked would not be happening. But that was nothing new. Every boy I was interested in could not seem to get past my eccentric style or my belief in magic. I could change the way I dressed or hide my beliefs. I would most likely have a chance then, but my aunt told me never to change for anyone. Go on, get out of here, Mr. Ivanov shooed David and Kelsey away with parental annoyance. Thank you for the help, Junie. You're welcome. I don't see the point to this mess, I said, quickly erasing the lingering image of David and Kelsey from my mind. A smile hid under Mr. Ivanov's mustache. They're just happy for the summer to finally be here, aren't you? He stood there, towering over me, so all I could see were his tweed pants and brown leather penny loafers. Yes, it means I'm out of here and I can stay with my aunt at her bed and breakfast. His eyebrows lifted. She has a bed and breakfast? Yeah, it's called Armistice Manor, and it's supposed to be a place of refuge from the hostilities of the world. It's been in the family for generations. I lifted the papers I had collected and placed them on the nearest desk. I loved going to Armistice because I felt safe there. Long were the days of being picked on at school, or getting in the way of my mom's business parties. I was free to be able to be myself, and it was amazing. You wouldn't happen to know if she has any vacancies, would you? There was always a vacancy. But did I really want to spend my vacation with my pre-calc teacher? I wouldn't know, I murmured noncommittally. Mr. Ivanov tore a corner from one of the papers and handed it to me. Can I have her number? I could use a vacation. For some reason the word sure came out of my mouth before I could stop it. I pulled a pen from the pocket of my fuchsia bell-bottoms and scrawled Aunt Melinda's number. Mr. Ivanov's face lightened. I can clean up the rest, thanks. I'll see you next year, if not before. I flashed a fake smile as I picked up my leather satchel bag and slung it over my shoulder. It was heavy, full of my locker's contents already, so I could avoid the mob of restless teenagers fighting to get out the door. Bye, I said as I left, looking for my place among the crowd. I didn't tell him I'd already been accepted into college a year early. He'd forget me before too long anyway. The hall was claustrophobic, causing my stomach to knot up. I couldn't stand being next to so many people, so I quickly made my way to the door. Once in the hall, I was pushed forward and back, left and right, and I had to hold my breath to keep from screaming in agony. My existence was only ever recognized by them when Kelsey, the cheerleader, needed to torment someone. They wouldn't stop shoving, and soon my body collided with a tall girl in heels. "Watch it," she spat at me. "Real lady, isn't she?" said the judgmental voice in my head. Something surged inside of me then, making my hands tingle like they'd just regained circulation. I spun around and glared at her overly made-up face before someone shoved me in her direction. Before we'd even touched, she flew backwards and collided with the lockers. I stood there stricken. I'd never even touched her, yet she hit the lockers like I was picking a fight. I hurried outside, looking behind me to see if a mob was following to burn me at the stake for the freak incident that just happened. I opened my arms wide, reveling in the space. I was so happy to finally be free from the building and the droves of people it contained. The slight breeze cooled my face as I stood there, trying to assess what had just happened. My long chestnut hair flowed behind me in the wind. A hand pressed lightly on my shoulder, and I panicked, thinking for a second that a fist would follow. I turned, and relief spread through me. It was the freckled, pale hand of my friend Miles. He was a year younger than me, but at least 2 feet taller, so I always felt dwarfed by his presence. Poor Miles was graced with a full head of carrot-colored hair, and would talk in odd, overly mature ways when he was uncomfortable. He was also an artist, but it made him sensitive to the world around us. Sometimes Miles would have to be left alone for days when he got overloaded by things. "Hey, Junebug, are you doing anything for your birthday this week?" he asked. "I'm not sure," I said, hating that he'd given me a nickname after an insect. "I'll be at my aunt's. I'm sure she'll make a cake or something. Last year it was 6-tiered and looked like it belonged at a wedding, but it tasted good, so I didn't complain." Miles handed me a small rectangular box wrapped in a polka dot paper with a light blue ribbon. I'm probably not going to see you all summer, so I figured I'd give it to you now." I narrowed my eyes and smirked. I loved presents, and he knew this. His was the only gift I'd be getting before I left Morningside Heights. Shoving my finger under the fold of the paper, I tore it open to discover a purple jewelry box, velvet and gilded. Inside was a handmade charm bracelet with all the things I loved: a book, cat, rose, a pair of ice skates, a cathedral, and a fairy. Between each charm was a glistening aqua handmade lampwork bead. "Miles, I love it." I flung my arms around his neck and gave him a friendly hug. "The beads match your eyes," he blushed. "Thanks," I said, running my fingers over the charms. A full school bus sat to our right, the rowdy students inside screaming with laughter. Crumpled balls of paper flew from the open windows, like the students were using catapults to storm the castle, and I was the castle. One hit me square in the back of the head. I turned, mildly annoyed, and made a nasty face at them. The window slammed shut, and a small puff of dust plumed out from the window. The particles glistening in the wind. Amber Rose, Kelsey's curly-haired sidekick, poked her head out another window. "What's your problem, weirdo?" she asked before yanking her overly permed head back into the bus. I let out an exasperated sigh and turned back to Miles. I was glad to be free of all the kids, but I still couldn't bring myself to tell Miles I had been accepted to Martin and Hallie's Academy of the Arts. I didn't want to hurt him after he'd been such a loyal friend in a world of cruelty. There were rumors that Martin and Hallie's was the most prestigious arts academy in the nation, and that only the students my age accepted there were prodigies. I certainly wasn't that, but my mom had a wonderfully supplied pocketbook and liked the idea that it was a private school. No coming home for the holidays. I wouldn't be returning to Aunt Melinda's bed and breakfast until I had completed my first year of college there, which my mom loved. She was jealous of my close, easy relationship with Aunt Melinda. "Do you want to come over tomorrow? We can hang out before I leave at 5." "Sure, I'll see you in the morning," Miles smiled. When I didn't ask him to stay, he took off running, his cargo shorts swishing loudly. I closed the jewelry box and lifted the flap on my bag, tossing it inside and cinching the drawstrings. I walked along the line of buses until I found mine, and when I got on it was worse than anticipated. 2 girls giggled as they pointed at me, and a voice from the back of the bus echoed in the air. "Where's the rest of your clown suit, loser?" I looked at my lacy bell-bottoms. I loved those pants, even if they did make me look like a hippie from the 60s. My sense of style was one of the things that made me such an easy target for the jokes and pranks the students of Morningside High loved to play. After the comment from the back of the bus, the children roared in laughter. I smiled at the bus driver and let myself off. I would rather risk a mugging on the streets during my hour walk home than one more drive on that stinky headache of a bus with those people. A single day didn't go by when I wasn't picked on, laughed at, or in some other way humiliated. Yes, I dressed differently, and turned down any guy who thought making out under the bleachers sounded appealing, but I think it was my blatant belief in magic, fairies, dragons, and other lands that weren't on any U.S. map, that made me the ultimate geek target. I think Miles believed, though, too, because he never laughed when I talked to him about Armistice, or some of the strange things I saw there. Magic definitely existed. I just didn't know how to prove it. It was almost dark by the time I got home, and long past dinner time. The only way my mom would notice was if she was actually hungry, something I hadn't witnessed in a long time. I had to cook dinner for myself every night, and bemoaned the fact that she didn't just hire a personal chef. Mom could certainly afford it. Her lawyer's salary easily paid for our high-rise penthouse in downtown Morningside Heights. We owned the entire floor except for the utility closet, which irked my mom, Lucinda, to no end. The house was silent as I slowly peeked my head around the corner to see if she was waiting for me. I was startled by the jingle of my great tabby cat, Anvari, as he pranced around in his belled collar. I scooped him up, letting out a grunt because of his size, and padded over to the doorway of my mom's home office. On the massive desk, a lamp illuminated her bleach blonde mop of hair. She was busy writing something I probably didn't care about. I already knew where my dad, Jethro, was. The same place he always was, in the basement we rented from the building's owner. He had set up an inventor's lab, and might as well have lived down there. Carefully I tiptoed through the living room, which was hard with all the statues Mom had scattered about. The last thing I wanted was to knock over her replica of the Veiled Lady. I knew it cost thousands. 2 years ago I had made water rings all over our coffee table from Liberia. It looked like an octopus had walked all over it. Mom grounded me for several months, and I was never allowed to visit Aunt Melinda that year. I opened my bedroom door, and it let out a creak. Shoot! The hinge! I froze. That blasted thing always gave me away. I adjusted my pressure on the door as I had done many times before, and tried again. Success! It was silent. I slipped into my room and closed the door without a click. I set Anvari on my bed next to my yellow and black duffel bag. "There you go, sweetheart." I patted him on the head and rummaged through the room, pushing aside tomes like Urban Fairies and How to Spot Them, and Pixies, Trolls, and other mystical nuisances, to dig up my clothes from the pile. I had almost finished packing for Armistice when I heard the knock I was afraid of. My mother stood there in her business suit, a navy blue blazer and a pencil skirt, hugging her like she was trying to impress someone other than my father. I stared at the mole on the right side of her chin. Her entire side of the family had one, though mine was smaller and resembled a tear that branded me under my left eye. I didn't look anything like my mother, with her snub nose and green eyes. We had the same long, wavy hair, but hers had been bleached a yellowy blonde. My mom always wore her typically disapproving expression, one slim eyebrow raised. Aunt Melinda said she was so stern with me because she didn't want to lose me too. Supposedly, my mother delivered us months before she became pregnant with me. Aunt Melinda said his name was Zeke, and that my mom had been shattered when he died. It was strange to think of my mom as anything but cold and aloof, but maybe it was just me she could care less about. "Still planning on going to Armistice?" she asked, her tone calloused. I turned away and continued packing. "Yes, Miles is coming over tomorrow to hang out until I leave." "Am I going to have to take you again?" She sounded annoyed. I shuddered at the thought of Mom taking me to Armistice. Every time she drove me, she was grouchier than usual, yammering on about how horrible Aunt Melinda was. It was enough to make me cringe. "No, I save up for the fare. I'll make it if you let me pack." Mom crossed her arms. "I don't understand why you flee to Armistice the minute you have a free second. What does Aunt Melinda have there that we cannot get you here?" "Well, for one thing, she actually spends time with me." I stopped, assessing her expression. If I continued, she'd probably forbid me from going. I quickly grabbed my sweater from under a book on my dresser. It fell to the ground, launching twinkling paper fairies everywhere that almost appeared to be flitting along on their own. "You've got to be kidding me. If Mom sees another magic thing, she's bound to destroy my room while I'm away, and all I'll have left is a cot and a holy blanket." I lifted Anvari from the bed and snuggled him as I braved a look at my mother. Her nostrils were flared and her jaw was clenched. "If I would have kept Armistice, I would have burned it to the ground had I the chance. Then you wouldn't be so fascinated with Melinda, and your head wouldn't be lost in all this nonsense." She stormed out of my room and slammed the door, rattling my jewelry stand nearby. I couldn't very well tell her that there was something about that house that drew me near. So many things had happened to me during my visits that were bizarre, convincing me it was a magical place. I just needed proof. One time, I was riding Aunt Melinda's horse, Ajax, and I saw what I thought were a bunch of fairies flying around the lake. When I asked her about it, she told me I was imagining things, and that maple seeds often looked like fairies when they fell. I told my mom about it when I returned home, which only made her mad. Mom didn't approve of anything involving magic, fairies, or Aunt Melinda. She'd had some sort of falling out with everyone from the Sperling side of the family before I'd been born, and both her and my father avoided the manor successfully until I was around 6 years old, when my Grandma Astrid grew incredibly ill and summoned them. After my first visit there, I used to whine to visit Armistice every day, setting my mom's blood boiling. No matter what I said or did, she couldn't seem to get past some deep-rooted anger towards her sister. In our house, I would sometimes lock myself in my room and cry, wishing for a friend who understood what I was going through. As I grew older, I became less susceptible to the neglect my parents showed me, though it still hurt to experience. I guess that was why Armistice always had a special place in my heart, along with Aunt Melinda. It was a place of happiness, a place where I was content, and Aunt Melinda made me feel welcome, something I never experienced under my parents' roof. I put the rest of my things in my bag and found Mom in her study, yakking to some partner on the phone. "Mom, you hungry?" I asked tentatively, and she waved me away with annoyance. I didn't know why I even asked anymore. Okay then. I wandered to the white kitchen and pulled out a leftover rotisserie chicken. I pulled the stool up to the kitchen island to pick at the meat, alternating pieces between myself and Anvari, who'd joined me. He swatted at the food excitedly and laughed. I laughed. "Are you that hungry?" I looked at his food bowl, which was empty. "Oh, sorry, buddy." I pulled a chicken leg from the container and tossed it in his bowl. Anvari let out a squeal of a meow and jumped down, his bell jingling as he meandered to his feast. "There, sweets, I'm gonna go take a shower. You enjoy that, and if she tries to take it from you, scratch her." I walked to the bathroom and undressed. Turning the water on, I stepped into the shower and let the hot water send tingles throughout my body with its burn. It was a pleasant pain that was welcomed after a long, aggravating day. Well, that is the end of chapter 1 of Armistice. If you would like to have me read some more, or if you would like to purchase your own copy, you can go to my website, which is smariecarlson.com, or you can buy it on Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, or Smash Reads. It'll be available October 28th. Thanks for watching. Bye.